call our next speaker. Our next speaker is Hemanth DP sir. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Asia Pacific Training Flight Academy. His previous assignment was in January 19 and included as Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial Officer and Vice President and Chief Operating Manager at GMR Airport Group, for which is the fifth most valuable private airport company. Hemant sir has worked in many multifunctional roles like revenue operations all across the country, covering Middle East and India's subcontinent. He completed his MBA from Indian Institute of Foreign Trade and International Airport Professional, which is designated from ACI ICAO. ACI stands for Airport Council International and ICAO stands for International Civil Aviation Organization. Next, his best thought is he always believes in building teams, and he shows this from his thought. He always says your legacy should not be in maintaining how many material goals did one achieve, but in how many leaders have you built out of people. This by this thought, I wanna call Hemant sir. And
Hello.
yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great to be here, sharing thoughts and our views on what are the what's the potential of the country and how we can leverage that for youngsters and for our workforce in India, which is mutually beneficial for both the workforce as well as for the country. Now, first and foremost, we all have heard enough data about the country saying that is among the top 5 economies in the world, and of course, we're the second most populated country in the world with one of the largest workforces, a large number of young graduates coming out, and we are also the 7th largest country by land area in the world. All of this has tremendous benefits. How do we exploit these benefits or leverage these benefits to help our countrymen and women, and they in turn get into gainful employment and help the country grow? And it's all the more important in the current situation when everybody is dealing with the COVID pandemic and the downturn in the economy, and a lot of fear, a lot of young graduates passing out of schools and colleges are concerned, and rightly so, because of the current situation. There are companies are laying off people, companies are cutting down salaries. So what's going to happen to newcomers who don't even have any experience? Well, those points are valid. Give opinions and hope that those opinions are useful and they help in us rebuilding the economy, which is currently quite shattered, so to speak. Now, if you look at India as a country, which are still very, very underutilized and underexploited. I'll come to a few sectors. There's not enough time to talk on all of that. Now, if you look at our GDP split, our largest component comes from services and then agriculture and manufacturing. Services picked up as a sector in the 90s when IT came into being and IT-related services, etc. And now we are, the service sector is one of the largest contributors to the economy. That has created millions and millions of jobs. And Indians, the youngsters in the 90s or late 80s, they took on to IT like a house on fire. I remember everybody having a line on the resume saying they've done C++, COBOL, this, that, and the other. And most of us didn't even know what this meant. But people went and did the courses anyway. And lo and behold, soon we are the second largest IT power in the world after US. And, Bangalore and Hyderabad are among the top 3 IT destinations in the world. And indeed, then our companies came up with the concept of call centers, knowledge centers, back-end centers, etc., which has produced millions and millions of jobs and helped fuel the economic growth. One area which is still not fully tapped is manufacturing, and I'm sure all of you have heard a lot about manufacturing being boosted. One of the success stories in China, which by the way 30 years was behind us, and now they're far ahead of us. They're about 5 times the size of our GDP, though they're same size as our population and a little bigger in land area, is manufacturing, and of course services as well. We have been an agro-based economy, and we have depended mostly on agricultural output as our job creation as well as the GDP growth. However, it's not to reduce the overall output, but the percentage output has reduced as a contribution to GDP, primarily because the other sectors have grown. Now, if you look at India, if I take 2-3 sectors, for example, aviation, let me talk about that. We currently move about 300 million passengers a year. And like in the introduction, it was said that, I am the CEO at the Asia Pacific Flight Training Academy Limited, which trains pilots, for commercial pilots, for flying airplanes, both in India and wherever they need to. Now, 300 million passengers, based on our population, one would think, population being about 1.2 billion plus, that it's about 25% of our population. But that's not true. 300 million, 25% of the population does not fly. Most of us, who fly regularly, like I fly almost every week, a couple of times. And by the way, after COVID, after the lockdown opened up, I've already taken about 20 flights. So for those folks who are scared to fly or worried about flying, it's absolutely safe. The airports are clinically clean, airplanes are clinically clean. And that's the best way to travel compared to a train or a bus, which is obviously not very organized, or chances of infections are high there. And the price difference is not too much between a second AC or a third AC or a Rajdhani and a plane ticket. Those are at 2,000-3,000 rupees, and a plane ticket may be 4,000, 5,000. So just for about 1,000 rupees difference, you get to fly to a place within 2 hours, whereas a train takes 2 days. And you have to deal with the crowded platforms and eat meals from a railway canteen, which is known for its quality. So flying is definitely safer and a better option. Now, coming to it, those flyers, like when I fly about 100 times a year, I'm counted as 100 passengers, whereas it's actually 1. So when you take unique flyers, we only have 6 to 7% of the population and below has never flown. Even in our families, when we go and talk to some uncles and aunties and far relatives, they never sat in a plane. That is not a true reflection of our economy, neither by size, nor by area, nor by our GDP strength, or by per capita income. It doesn't mean that 90% Indians cannot afford to fly. They can very well afford to fly. It's just that the reach has not reached the aviation reach has not gone to the entire country. About 60 to 70% of the passengers still come from about 6 airports: Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Calcutta, Madras, etc. But India doesn't reside in these cities. India resides in the whole country. So there are more airports being opened up. The governments are talking about opening another 150, 200 airports, and getting a reach closer to peripheral areas from where it is very difficult to fly. For example, if you go from South India to Northeast, it can take you 3 to 4 days, whereas a flying time will be there in 3 hours. That's because there's not enough airports, not enough connections there. So when you look at it, today India has about 670, 650 aeroplanes. This is pre-COVID data, of course. Currently, some of them are not flying. So with the base of about 300 million passengers, India has been growing in the last 4 to 5 years at double-digit growth rate, 10% plus. And we have reached there, which is fantastic, and it's one of the highest growth rates in the world. Despite all this, 300 million passengers that we fly, as well as the number of aeroplanes we have, we are slated to be the 3rd largest aviation market in the world by 2024-25, as per IATA, International Air Transport Organization, which is the apex body for airlines. Now, we are currently around number 7. So when you say we're going to be number 3 in the world, that's great. But we are at 650 aeroplanes plus. But the number 2 in the world currently is China. Now, if you can guess how many aeroplanes China has, being a number 2 currently, it's mind-boggling. It's 6,900 aeroplanes, approximately. So we are at 650, they are at 6,900. So though the number can be, number 3, 4, 5, and they are number 2, but you see the gap. That gap, 10 times gap compared to us in China, that's the potential. China also has about 1.3 billion people. So when only 6% of the population flies, 90% is your potential. It's like that old saying that, 2 salespeople were sent to an island to say, what is the potential of shoes in that island? And one guy called back and said, all Adivasis here, there is nobody wears shoes, they wear grass skirts, so, zero potential. And the other one calls and says, fantastic opportunity, 100% potential, nobody wears shoes, so 100% of the market is for us for grabs. That's exactly the situation in airlines, aviation today. With only 6% of the country actually participating in aviation, 90% is your potential. Now, even if 2 to 3% of that 90% comes to aviation, you're talking about double the growth, 50% growth. From 6, it goes to 9%. Now, that requires a lot of professional trained pilots, crew members, engineers, ground staff, airport staff, airline staff, booking staff, IT staff, the whole things. Harish Chandra committee report, which did assessment on aviation sometimes back in the last decade, they said that one aviation job produces close to 7 to 8 additional jobs. What I mean is, when you have airport, it's not just the airline and the airport which mans them. There are taxi people, there are retail people, restaurants, cleaners, housekeeping folks, police, the works. So it works as a economic and employment multiplier. So a growth in aviation is one of the best bets that we have for this country. And even as it stands today, we have about 1,000 planes on order as it stands today. Now, those 1,000 aeroplanes, each aeroplane requires close to 14 pilots to fly it. From morning, let's say, to evening 8 or 10 o'clock when the last flight, out 14 pilots, which means at a time it's 2 pilots. Duty norms that a pilot cannot work for more than 8 hours, 12 hours from the time he wakes up, to ensure that there is no fatigue and accident or anything like that. And of course, then there is a leave redundancy you have to take into consideration, privileged leave, sick leave, and all that stuff. So you need 14 pilots. So we have 1,000 aeroplanes on order, which means we need 14,000 pilots to man these aeroplanes in the next 4 years, 5 years. And if you include COVID, take another 1 or 2 years, it's still 7 years, let's say. That is 2,000 pilots approximately a year. Now, you would be amazed at how many pilots India is producing currently within the country. It is just 350 pilots a year. So if you need 2,000 pilots average for the next 7 years, and you're producing only 350, the asking rate is 1:7. The demand is so high and the supply is so low. One of the reasons is there are not enough flight training schools, not enough professional ones, not enough airspace, not enough airports, not enough aeroplanes. Government is currently addressing it. They are planning to open up another 20-25 airports for flight training. They are encouraging FTOs to bring in more aeroplanes. And of course, there are bank loans now coming through which will support, because a commercial pilot license costs about 40-45 lakhs and a type training costs another 15 lakhs. So it's about 50-60 lakhs, let's say, it costs you. That looks very forbidding. It's a 2 to 3 year course. But it's same as an MBA or engineering degree abroad. People go to foreign universities and not that many people come into flying. But what you need to understand is, when you spend 50, let's say 40 or 50 or 60 lakhs, the job as a first officer, day one, when he or she joins an airline, in about a year's time, when they get released, when they get confirmed, their salary goes up to 3 lakh rupees a month. That's about 36 lakh rupees per annum. Now, I can't think of any profession in the country or in the world for that matter. And by the way, to start as a pilot, you start from 12th standard. You don't need any big degrees. You just need physics and maths in your 12th standard exam to start training as a commercial pilot. And in case you don't have, let's say you're a commerce stream or a arts graduate, doesn't have maths and science as part of 12th, you can always appear for supplementary exam through the open school, etc., and pass those two exams and then still come and enroll. Once you become a pilot, let's say you start at 12th, which is your 17 or 18-year-old, and it takes you about 2 years to become a pilot. At the age of 19 or 20, as a first officer, you're getting 36 lakhs per annum. I can't think of any job which pays a 20-year-old 36 lakhs per annum. And as a result, that loan of 50 or 60 that you're taken looks now minuscule, because most pilots pay off their loans in about a year or two or maximum 3. Because at that age, there's not much commitments. You're not married. You don't have family. You don't have a mortgage running. So they quickly clear off their loans. And then as a pilot, again, what most people don't know is you can work till the age of 65, as long as your medical is okay, which is you need to do what is called as a class 1 medical from the medical authorities. And as long as you keep your health intact, which means basically eyesight, hearing, that your heart, your BP, your diabetes, basic stuff, which all of us would like to keep it under check. So here you are at the age of 20, you're a pilot, potentially earning 36 lakhs, and then you can work another 45 years. Now, when you start at 3 lakh, when you become a captain, you need a few thousand hours to log in, and then you need to pass your ATP exam, which is air transport pilot license certification. Once that is done, and once you become a captain in another, let's say, 5 years or so, your salary can go up to 7 lakhs, 8 lakhs. And when you become an examiner, designated examiner, check pilot, etc., your salary exceeds 10 lakhs. So you're earning, crore and a half or more for your entire life. Not many jobs in the country or anywhere in the world offer that type of a facility. Now, that's an option. I told you, we are producing 350 and we need about 2,000 plus. And that is taking only airline into account. I have not taken into account general aviation, which means, if you go to a country like US, Europe, a lot of companies own aeroplanes, because in a country the size of India, if you have to send 3-4 executives on a meeting from here to, let's say, Kerala or here or there, if you want to catch a commercial flight and go do those meetings and come back, it can take you a couple of days, because check-in, check-out, you have to wait for the flight. Some flights may be in the afternoon, some may be in the evening. Whereas with a private aircraft or private jet, you can reach there in half the time. And the cost of operating that for 5-6 people, if they were to fly in a private jet, senior people, it's almost as much as a taxi. Now, this has been exploited very well in countries like US, Europe, or even in China. We have not even scratched the surface here. We have barely a few hundred aeroplanes in the commercial space. Then there is Medivac. Then there is cargo. A country which is considered among the top 5 economies in the world has one cargo airline since independence. That was Blue Dart. Recently, SpiceJet added some freighters into their fleet, but that is abysmal. My last company, which was FedEx, which is one of the world's largest logistic companies, it's a $70 billion company that has 800 plus aeroplanes. Now, that one company has more aeroplanes than our entire country put together. And by the way, all of FedEx aeroplanes are cargo aeroplanes. And here we have one company and now another one, SpiceJet. Put together, we have less than 7 or 8 cargo aeroplanes. 7 or 8 for the whole country, second most populated country, versus 800 for one company. And if China has 6,900 aeroplanes, US has close to 12 to 14,000 aeroplanes. Do you see the numbers? We are 650, China 6,900, Europe is around 6 to 7,000, US is around 12 to 14,000. So there is the opportunity. So that is why a lot of companies come to India, collaborate with us to, it's a win-win situation. We learn from them and they benefit, from the economic growth that happens here. And that is how a global economy functions. So that is one aspect. That is one area of career one can easily look at. In the good old days, it was thought that pilot was, either you had to have some rich uncle or a mom or dad or someone in the airline industry. Otherwise, you go and look for a clerical job. No, not people from middle class, lower middle class who are coming. Like I said, you need to take a loan. So yeah, some can be self-accrued funds, some can be taken based on your house mortgage or something like that. I mean, every house is at least worth 50-60 lakhs anyway. So you can get a loan for 30-40 lakhs, and then you can defer those loans for 3 years. For example, when you're under training, you don't need to pay back the loan. You can have a setup that you start paying back the interest and the principal only once you start flying as a professional. So there is no immediate cash flow or immediate money requirement. You take a loan, you take a moratorium, come and train, get a job, and then start paying off. And then a few people start doing like that, then the economic multipliers start. And then, of course, coming to, we talked about the cargo, we talked about passenger, we talked about general aviation. Flight training itself, we have close to 150 aeroplanes in the country currently. Now, again, 150 number looks big, 150 aeroplanes. But let me tell you, one of our collaborators in Europe, they have 40 aeroplanes. There's another aviation company in Europe which is doing flight training. They have about close to 80 aeroplanes. And I was in discussion with the CEO of a flight training organization in US. They have 400 aeroplanes in one training school. So all training schools put together in US, they will have another 5, 6, 7,000 aeroplanes in training alone, whereas we are talking about 150. Again, that's an opportunity because each flying training school requires pilots, requires engineers, requires continuous airworthiness managers, staff, etc., etc. Now, this is just aviation on the crew front, pilots, as in engineers, cabin crew, and so on and so forth. And like I said, just like any other industry, that also requires IT, finance, company secretaries, CAs, lawyers, the works. So you see the economic multiplier that I'm talking about. Then, of course, the other major sector in which, again, I worked is logistics. I was in FedEx and I was in TNT, which is now part of FedEx, and I also worked for Blue Dart. India's current cost of GDP, that is cost of logistics, I'm sorry. If you look at it, that to produce X% of output in GDP, how much do you need to spend on logistics? Because obviously production happens in one center and it has to be distributed all over the country and the world for it to reach the consumers. So in Europe, in developed economies, the cost to GDP ratio of logistics is around 6%, 5%, 7%. Whereas in India, it's again a terrible 12 to 13%, which means an Indian is paying double of what a European is paying for the same material to reach from one place. You saying that how in India labor is cheap, trucking is cheap, railway is cheap, why is it expensive? Because some of you would have done 12th and some of you maybe you're in college or done MBAs, you would have been taught something called as an ICC, inventory carrying cost. When you buy an X-ray brain scanning machine of, let's say, $5 million, that's about 30-40 crores, and you ship it in a truck, hypothetically, from Kerala to Delhi, it'll take 10 days, 15 days to reach. The interest rate on 50 crores at even 10% is 5 crore per annum. 5 crore divided by 12 is around 40 lakhs per month. 40 lakhs divided by 30, about 1.5 lakhs a day. So if you take 10 days to reach from Kerala to Delhi, you have spent about 15 to 20 lakhs on interest alone. Whereas when you fly it on an aeroplane, it'll reach there in 2 hours. Now, the cost of the machine, let's say, weighs 1 ton. So you have paid 6,000 rupees on train or a truck, and you have paid 30,000 rupees on an aeroplane. But aeroplane gets you there in 2 hours, which means you can sell the machine next day, and 1 day's interest, 1.5 lakh is what it's cost you. Whereas you bring it in a plane, in a truck, 1.5 lakh rupees a day, 10 days is 15 lakhs or 20 lakh rupees. Which one is cheaper? That is what is the inventory carrying cost comes into play. And hence, since we have only about 6-7 cargo aeroplanes, and most of our passenger aircraft are narrow body, which means they cannot take an X-ray machine, they cannot take any big or sensitive equipment, we are moving everything by road, rail, etc. And as a result, it is costing our exchequer a lot of money, and you and I as end users are paying for it. This interest rate of 15 lakhs, 20 lakhs that I just talked about, who do you think is paying for it? The end user. So if it's brain scanning, when our nears and dears go for an X-ray, instead of it, the 1500 is gone into transporting it, and nobody knows this. And then, of course, there is a risk of it getting damaged on the way because it's on a truck, and the insurance, the temperature control, all that stuff. I could go on with examples like this. Medical, pharmaceutical industry. You can imagine if you carry ampules and sensitive medicine in train and truck instead of aeroplanes, what happens to the efficacy? The loss on every 10 tomatoes produced in the country by our farmers, only 4 are consumed by us. 6 are lost on the way due to. This is what makes our cost to GDP ratio. So there you go. That is another huge untapped market. There is lot IT innovation needs to happen. This 3D printing is coming. A lot of it will alleviate those things. So these are massive opportunities which are not tapped. These are opportunities both for entrepreneurs who want to set up business in this today. In India, unfortunately, when I was running Deccan, I was deputy CEO there in Deccan Airways when we started off from then passenger, then on to cargo. We had a delivery point, which means Delhi to Bombay, you deliver next day a package or a document. There are less next day points within India, i.e. India in Singapore, in Dubai, in New York, than from India to go, let's say, Kerala to Guwahati or Guwahati to Baroda, or Baroda to Ludhiana, or Ludhiana to Trivandrum. So there is an opportunity, huge opportunity to carry perishable, carry opportunity for entrepreneurs, and also opportunity for potential employees. Third sector I'll touch just to give an overall view. One I'll touch upon is tourism. India has 7,500 kilometers of coastline. You want to go and do what to a small country like Dubai, which has a population of 6 or 7 million, which is smaller than most of our metros. You can do whitewater rafting. You can do skating. You can do, Dubai is a hot desert country, but there
So sorry to interrupt, sir. There is a lot of signal problem, and also for the want of time, I would request you, you can just come to a conclusion part in 2-3 minutes. Others, please bear with us. There is an internet issue. That is one big issue with virtual event, which is not in our control. Else, further we can take care of everything. So we understand the internet issue. Hemant sir, can you hear me? All right. I think he got disconnected. All right. I'll request the next MC to take over. You can give a proper closing for Hemant sir, and you can continue with the next session. In the meantime, speaker can coordinate with Hemant.
Thank you, Mr. Hemanth. We had an amazing session. And literally all the participants loved your session, sir, for detailing explaining it to us and talked about the aviation logistics and how a student from completing a schooling can join the aviation and also pay off his loans and start earning like.
Join the mission, build India. Join the mission, build India to serve the world. Join the mission and build India to serve the world.
Join the mission, build India to serve the world.
Join the mission, build India to serve the world.